Sword sharks were significant ocean predators in Serina seas for most of Serina's history throughout the Cryocene. Descended distantly from xiphophorus fishes, platies, and swordtails, they filled the niche of sharks on Earth and broadly resemble a cross between a shark and a barracuda. Sword sharks had large, extensible jaws lined with dozens of sharp teeth, which were replaced throughout their lifetimes, and they were without exception carnivorous. The smallest species would have fit into a modest home aquarium, while the largest became monstrous apex predators, some of whom could reach lengths as long as a school bus, and surely were capable of hunting almost anything they wished to in the sea. They had large eyes, and unlike sharks, were predominantly visual hunters. Most species fed predominantly on living prey and were fast and agile swimmers. They would also feed on carrion if they came across it, but only a small percentage make a habit of regularly scavenging as, also unlike sharks, most of them lack a particularly keen sense of smell. Sword sharks as a clade were named for the appearance of their earliest representatives, some of which utilized an elongated lower tail fin to thrash through shoals of baitfish and stun them. Most such forms went extinct at the Cryocene-Thermocene boundary ocean acidification event. The surviving groups which reclaimed the open seas were more likely to belong to more generalized, small, shallow water predator guilds. The hunting techniques of the most specious group of surviving modern representatives, now called sword whales, usually rely on either ambush from cover or from underneath sediment, in which cases the fishes have developed flattened bodies and highly reduced buoyancy, or active pursuit in fast, agile open water predators, with the prey being caught in the jaws, which are either very strong and durable for biting and holding large prey, or highly elastic and can be shot forward at rapid speed to grab small prey. Sword whales since the end Cryocene have again become ecologically diverse and make use of many different diets. However, in addition to fish, some groups have evolved crushing molars to smash shellfish, while others have even become parasitic, biting and twisting away small circular plugs of tissue from other large fishes. The largest species have adopted filter feeding techniques. Their teeth absent or vestigial, they cruise along the surface and suck up whole shoals of copepods and shrimp with massive gaping jaws. With relatively large brains, some of the surviving sword whales could be considered very intelligent among fishes. Some are even social, not simply in a shoaling way, but working in groups to hunt. They cooperate as a team to coral shoals of fish into tight formations, which can be more easily managed. These tendencies evolved earlier in their line's descent. During the Middle Cryocene, there even existed a lineage of large, social sword shark in which the female which guarded its young in the safety of a pack until they were large enough to fend for themselves. Unfortunately, this group did not survive the end of the Cryocene, with modern representatives migrating to sheltered coastal environments to birth their young before abandoning them to their fate. The babies are born entirely capable to fend for themselves and proportionally large to their mother in litters which can range from just a couple in some large species to 10 or more in the smaller types. All sword whales nourish their developing young via a placental tie, giving birth to a few large offspring. This tendency is inherited from their sword shark ancestors. The painted gulpy is the largest sword whale and one of the largest fish ever to evolve on Serina. It is a gentle giant, feeding upon plankton that it filters with rakers in its gills. The sexes are highly dimorphic, with males being very colorful and competing to attract the larger, more subdued females. Sword whales, a diverse group of derived poecilids that have radiated heavily since the end of the Cryocene, today include the largest animals in Serina's oceans. Named for their ancestry, they descend from the early swordtail fishes, and their generally large sizes, these fish actually lack the tail swords of earlier relatives. Ecologically diverse, these fishes have indeed lost most obvious resemblances of their earlier ancestors and relatives, such as the sword sharks, as they specialize towards new niches in the ecosystem. But the males can still be recognized by the presence of a specialized gonopodium fin, which is remarkably unchanged and still used to internally fertilize the female. Sword whales fill a wide variety of roles in the global ocean by this time. With the extinction of bird whales at the end of the Cryocene, no extant avians approached the larger sword whales in size, with porporints, their closest extant analogues, having not evolved any mechanisms to allow them to grow nearly so large as a result of still laying their eggs on the land. This means that the Thermocene oceans again belong to the fish, and they have made the most of this new boon of opportunity. The apex predator of the Thermocene Sea is a pelagic sword whale known as Gigodon oculopter. Growing to upwards of 25 feet in length and weighing more than 5,000 pounds, this highly streamlined fish sports a large and extraordinarily powerful jaw adapted not to extend and snare smaller prey, but to grip and to tear flesh from the bodies of other, sometimes even larger beasts. The teeth inside are large and conical, strong enough to endure heavy use without breaking. The body is specialized for rapid movement, with a crescent-shaped tail fin and a very large collapsible dorsal. The anal fins of males are still specialized as a mating structure and absent in females, so the pelvic fins have moved backward to fill its role in stabilizing the fish as it swims. Highly adaptable and tolerant to a wide range of water temperatures, Gigodon is found worldwide in nearly all open and some coastal water environments. Gigodon would be a formidable threat to anything else that shares the sea with it under any circumstance. But this giant poecilid is even more remarkable for its brain than its brawn. Gigodon has taken the large brains of its group to its current pinnacle. Its brain is very large by any standard, but especially among teleost fishes, with a high domed skull to accommodate it. This species has one of the highest brain-to-body ratios of any fish on Serina, and it is used for complex, cooperative problem-solving. Gigodon, though not strictly social, has the capacity to be a very effective pack hunter that works in cohesive units to hunt and kill prey. From much smaller fishes and birds to the very largest fish in the sea, its filter-feeding relatives. Social units, when present, are generally impermanent and social bonds loose. with any individuals that come across each other forming temporary alliances whenever necessary to take down large prey, while hunting solo when conditions better suit it. But communication between individuals is very well developed and facilitated by bold contrast markings and reflective blue patches of scales on their bodies. The scales on these patches can be rapidly angled up or down to darken or lighten, while a huge eye spot on the dorsal fin can be raised or lowered at will. Together, these pattern shifts, as well as rapid alterations of the intensity of the body pigment performed at high speed in the chaos of an attack, function as an innate and effective language that allows these fish to coordinate their attacks to best cut off the escape of their prey. Fish their own size or smaller, or killed with vigorous twisting bites that tear chunks of flesh off the still living victim, killing with blood loss and shock. But larger fishes are rammed in the gills with the jaws closed to incapacitate them through internal injury. Gigadons do not care for their young. Few sword whales do in the way some earlier relatives did. Pregnant mothers instead migrate toward equatorial shallows to give birth to their litters. 2 to 3 very large pups, up to 1/10 the mother's weight each, are born after a gestation of almost 1 year, and are left to fend for themselves in the shallower waters, where they will be among the largest and most formidable predators present from infancy. As they grow, the young will move north and south again to open waters and join their elders. Despite no further attention being provided to the young after birth, Gigadon is notable for being rather non-cannibalistic. Instinctive social signals presented by juveniles towards adults when they meet, similar to the communications that occur between cooperative hunters, serve as an appeasement signal and prevent adults from preying upon the young. Despite this friendly arrangement, Gigadon of noticeably different sizes have different prey preferences, and cooperation occurs primarily in similarly aged peer groups. Growth occurs for a long time period, being most rapid in the first 5 years, but continuing for up to 20 years, with adult lifespans around 50 years being commonplace. Sexual maturity occurs late, after 15 years of age, and births are years apart. Not all sword whales are impressive open water creatures with bold and colorful markings. Some species have gone down a different route entirely. Living in the deepest and coldest waters of Serina's northern polar waters 100 million years hence is one of the strangest of the large sword whales, a creature so strange and divergent from its relatives that its ancestry is all but obscured entirely. 14 feet in length and 3,000 pounds, the strange and very spiky lumphead Grumpus is certainly a sight to behold. The lumphead Grumpus is not especially closely related to the Gigadon or other large pelagic sword whales of the era, though it shares a smaller, coastal-dwelling ancestor from the end Cryocene, while its relatives moved out to the open sea and swiftly navigate surface waters. The Grumpus remained better adapted to live along the seafloor and is a slow swimmer. Now a solitary, shellfish-eating specialist, it uses its extraordinarily strong smashing jaws and blunt teeth to pulverize bivalves and benthic snails. It swims slowly, always low in the water, often just above the sea floor, where its own movements stir the sediment up and make visibility low. But this is not terribly important for the Grumpus, which finds its food through touch. Its ancestors evolved elongated rays on its pectoral fins, which they utilized to feel in the sand to uncover morsels of food. Over time, 2 rays in each fin became hypertrophied into long and independently rotational rods just for this purpose, allowing the fish to forage for food throughout the night when there was no visibility at all. Its nocturnal nature and solitary habits meant its coloration became subdued and mottled for camouflage, avoiding trouble primarily through its large size, thick protective scales, and territorial nature. These attributes ceased to be sufficient when other sword whales grew into large and formidable predators, however, and the Grumpus was caught slow and vulnerable to earlier ancestors of Gigadon, which quickly learned to overwhelm and flip the Grumpus, targeting its underside where its scales were less defensive. The two species entered an evolutionary arms race, evolving better tactics to handle the other, the Gigadon to kill the Grumpus, and the Grumpus to survive. Today, the Grumpus has, rather uniquely in such competitive struggles, won this race. Over eons, its elongated pectoral rays grew thick and sharply hooked, becoming defensive weapons with which it could thoroughly beat and stab its attacker's eyes and sensitive gills, deterring even the most aggressive individuals. Able to move each ray independently in nearly 360 degrees of motion, even a group of predators could be kept at bay. The first ray of the dorsal fin gradually evolved into a fifth mobile weapon, adopting a similar shape to the pelvic spines through a replication mutation, while lastly along the tail, thick keratinous growth developed into armor so that predators could find nowhere to grab hold and flip the ornery fish on its back to hit its underbelly. The ancestors of Gigadon moved on to primarily specialize on easier prey, and today the adult Grumpus is largely safe from predation. When threatened, this rhinoceros of the sea merely drops low onto the seabed and extends its large hooked spines, and very few creatures will attempt further harm upon it. Because the young of the Grumpus are still vulnerable to predation by gigadons and other large oceanic predators, even though they are born comparatively large like other sword whales, the Grumpus is a rare example that has redeveloped significant parental care. A single young is usually born and stays very close to its mother for the first 2 years, relying on her to protect it from its threats in one of the longest and most complex parental interactions among fishes. Sexual maturity is extremely delayed in this species, with females not mating until almost 30 years old, but a slow and leisurely life allowed by their dramatic defenses can let these strangest of fish survive close to 100 years. In the seas of Thermocene Serina, millions of species of fishes now thrive in warm, productive shallow seas. As on Earth, these fishes interact in myriad ways. Predators hunt prey, and prey try to avoid the predators. But not all relationships are antagonistic. Some are symbiotic, benefiting both parties with harm to neither. Such is the case with a very unusual species of derived guppy known as the polka dot flipjaw. This fish, about as long as a man's arm, is a commensal fish which has a neutral to symbiotic relationship with much larger fishes, particularly giant sword whales such as the gulpy. The mouth of the flipjaw was moved to the very top of its head and developed a suction-producing apparatus which allows the flipjaw to cling beneath much larger fish. With a free ride through the open sea, the flipjaw can then wait and detach when the host feeds, taking some of the scraps. But the flipjaw is not only a moocher. It also performs a beneficial service in scraping its host's skin free of algae and invertebrate parasites that would otherwise reduce its fitness. And so the flipjaw is not only tolerated but encouraged to follow along even by normally very dangerous predator fishes such as the gigadon, which often allows several of these small fish to ride along its underside and partake in its leftovers in exchange for being kept free of parasites. But not every fish that clings to the belly of these larger fish so beneficial to their hosts. Hiding in plain sight, albeit at lower population density than the flipjaw, is a sinister impostor. A very close look at a shoal of flipjaws hiding under the bellies of any large sword whale will often reveal one very different sort of fish that, though superficially marked with a similar polka dot pattern, is otherwise pulling an incredible ruse. Imitating the flipjaw remarkably well, it is very hard to tell that the deceptive sniplips does so by swimming upside down, with its normally downturned mouth held up against the belly of its host, and used not to scrub off bugs, but to cut and devour small slices of flesh. The sniplips is in fact a small species of sword whale itself, and not closely related to the flipjaw. Its imitation of flipjaw anatomy is in fact entirely convergent and flipped over, as it mimics the flipjaw by turning on its back. Its dorsal fin has two spikes which mimic the pectorals of the flipjaw, while it holds its own pectoral together to resemble the flipjaw's small dorsal fin. Even the gonopodium of a male flipjaw is imitated with a small pointed spine on the back of the sniplip's dorsal fin. Sniplips have evolved to so closely resemble flipjaws that even though they swim upside down, they copy their model's behavior so closely that larger fishes cannot distinguish them. While flipjaws clean their hosts and improve their fitness, sniplips attack them, using two scissor-like teeth that overlap when the mouth closes to shear chunks of skin and meat, causing open wounds and reducing their health. This ruse only works if flipjaws outnumber their carnivorous copycats substantially, or the sword whales would not tolerate either fish around them, and so the sniplips can never become highly abundant. But by remaining relatively rare and hiding among larger schools of benevolent lookalikes, it has found a secure and successful niche for itself as a liar and a thief. Though most sword sharks that have persisted this long and diversified in the early Thermocene, 100 million years hence, are the large and remarkable sword whales, there are a few outliers. Smaller, still sporting more resemblance to their colonist ancestors, are the Piscators, or fishermen fish, the most basal living sword sharks. Piscators descend from a small fish-hunting ancestor that threshed through the shallow seas and used its elongated tail lobe to stun baitfish. They are a clade which evolved more complex food-sourcing behaviors involving their tails, and which have colonized several new niches in Serina's seas. In all species, the tail is extremely exaggerated, and these fish are no longer fast swimmers in the open sea. Instead, they evolved to use their sneaking tails to poke around the seafloor, into the burrows of other fishes and crustaceans, and to function either to flush out where the hunter could snatch them, or to lure them out by imitating prey, such as a worm. The noodler is a generalized piscator that does just this. Swimming leisurely in weed-choked shallow seas, this fish eyes the sandy seafloor for patches of disturbed sediment that might indicate a hidden burrow. The sly hunter pokes at them with its tail sword and probes deep down into the tunnels. No matter how they twist and turn as a result of its highly flexible fin. Eventually, it reaches the end of the tunnel and corners its inhabitant, often a crayfish, which is likely to respond aggressively and defensively and pinch the intruder. The noodler has been waiting for this moment, however, and now flings its tail to the side, almost instantly pulling its tail from the tunnel and frequently bringing with it the crustacean, too bewildered by the sudden jerk to the surface to have even unclenched its claws. With a brief burst of speed, the noodler turns and grabs its prey, crushing it in powerful teeth, and then goes on its way to angle down another burrow. Some piscators have modified their tails into full-time lures. These species are relatively sedentary ambush predators. Some are flattened, shallow water hunters that dangle their tails, worm-like, out of the sand and wait for passers-by to nibble. But one group are even stranger. They have become open water hunters that live in Serina's deepest, murkiest depths and hunt by night, using bioluminescence to draw in their prey right into their waiting teeth. The worm on a string is one such denizen of the dark depths. It is named for its tail lure, which is stiff and rod-like most of its length, but becomes very flexible at its brilliantly illuminated tip, where light-producing cells produce a blue illumination that draws in curious fish from all around. The worm on a string floats motionless in the water column, save for flicks of its tail, for many hours until something approaches. This sly hunter then thrashes its tail closer and closer toward its teeth, imitating an injured invertebrate prey item. When the smaller fish is within range, it engulfs it in some 200 viciously sharp and needle-like teeth. Worm on a string are notable for their widely extensible jaws and even more expandable guts, which let them consume prey nearly their own length, an adaptation to potential shortages of food in these deeper, darker waters, which also allows the predator to retire deeper and into cover for long periods, and so limit the time it spends in the open, potentially advertising itself as a meal to larger hunters in the shadows.